Hey, Leslie.
Hi.
Welcome. It's so nice to see you and meet you. Thank you for being here today.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our time together.
Yes, same. I know. I'm Nina. Hello.
Yes.
And that's Jen. I'm sure you gathered. But I was telling her, I was like, we have to have Leslie on the podcast. The people need to meet her. So, just to kick us off, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Your family life? Anything you want to share?
So I am originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that was a great area to grow up in, but I'm also glad I left because it's very cold in the wintertime and a little gloomy. I moved around quite a bit and essentially have landed now in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I was in Austin, Texas for 10 years, and that's where really my business is like Work by Leslie, that all started there. And that was an important phase in my life for my own growth and wellness. But the gifts have been with me from the beginning in Pittsburgh. And so it's been a great journey. But I live here with my husband and our son, who is soon to turn 9. And we've found a lot of balance living in Raleigh that we didn't have in Austin. I think Austin was so busy that it was just a lot, if you will.
We can completely understand that. It is still kind of a lot. So I know exactly what you mean. So you are a psychic medium, and what kind of work is that? What do you do during a standard day at the office, if you have a standard day at the office?
I do actually have a pretty standard day. And so right now my office is out of the home. I used to have a cute little shop in Austin, and then we all know about COVID. And so, that's where a lot of our changes came from. But working as a psychic medium, there's a routine to what I do. So each time when I start work, I go through a whole centering, channeling, focused grounding exercise. And there's kind of like a little mantra or prayer that I do in order to essentially, I'm ready to connect, I'm ready to work. But I have to have calm and a lot of peace, so if things are a mess in life or something goes wrong, it can really shift my channel quite a bit. But I go into this space as a psychic medium, and the work, even though it's two words put together as one, it's two separate things. Psychically, the work comes from a lot more like up here, if you will. And it's connecting to the client and the information around them. Some people do it through aura. I do it through the chakras, and gain insight that will help someone navigate their path. So they might be going through a turbulent time or have certain choices that they have to make around career or health. And it's a great way to tap in. I can also tap into people's chakras, like for health reasons and whatnot. And then the mediumship side of things, that's where it's all about spirit. So this is where I tune into loved ones who've crossed over, and I gain information to help us validate their presence. So for me, more often than not, it starts with physical pain and ailments, usually associated with their passing. And then I will get information about how they're connected to the sitter, like a family relationship or marriage. And then it continues to go from there. Collect evidence essentially and offer what I'm getting. And the sitter has to validate it to ensure that we've got a good connection. And spirit too will offer insight about the future or about things that they see happening in the person's life. And so you get like, with some people, you get a little bit of a blend of the psychic mediumship, but I try to keep the mediumship pure and then go into the psychic side only when the client asks for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's so interesting. I actually was trying to learn a little bit more before we were meeting with you, and I did not realize that it was kind of like two separate avenues that you could follow there. So thank you for sharing that.
It is, and it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people in our country specifically don't realize that. Like I didn't realize it for the longest time. I thought it was all like intertwined and it would make sense how it could be. But with some training that I did, have you guys ever heard of the Arthur Findlay College before? Okay.
No.
It's world renowned. It's really a cool place. It's the real Hogwarts, if you will. It's in the UK. And that's where I really started to understand the difference between how we're connecting to spirit and the difference between the psychic mediumship. And so in the States, it's a lot more common, excuse me, to have the psychic medium blend. And when you start going into a lot of the European countries, you start to see a difference between the two.
How did you kind of first discover that you had these gifts? I imagine at first it was a little bit alarming. How old were you? How did you find this out about yourself?
So I didn't realize what all of this was, until I was like in my 20s. And before that, it was exactly like you said. It was frightening. So I grew up hearing people like talking in my bedroom at night. I would see things and people, movement. It was just a lot. The stuff that kids cry about, like these things are moving in my room and, I can't find something, but I sat down right there. So it was really frightening for a long time. And I lived in a house in particular when I was a teenager. This was back in Pittsburgh, where we came to find out like a young man had committed suicide in the home like many years before. And that house was seriously active. It like everybody kind of knew that I lived in what we called a haunted house. And there was really negative energy, like in one area down in the basement. And then there was spirit energy upstairs between mine and my brother's bedroom. And things just happened all the time, like doors opening and closing, electronics turning on and off, up and down in volume. And so it was really intimidating growing up. But just like most people who are able to pick up on other stuff like that with the sixth senses, it comes and goes. And so, depending on what I was doing in life or how much I had going on, I maybe wouldn't have as much activity, but I would still always have different experiences like premonition dreams or, just different events would occur that I knew were not typical, And when we moved to Austin, I was just really unsure about the move and I was somewhat unsettled there, having a hard time, meeting my community and everything and just finding my place and unhappy with work. And I started meditating. And this very first group meditation that I went to, all these things were happening all over again. The people walking around our apartment, sitting down on the bed, touching my hair, like all of these things. And so I thought, I really need to figure this out and not let it control my life anymore. And as soon as I started like diving into what the clair senses were and going into meditation and getting into local groups in the Austin community and hearing other people's stories, I started to realize what was happening and that I had these gifts and that it wasn't something to be afraid of, but instead something to nurture and learn about. So even though it was a little rough beginning, it was a good place to be. Austin was a great community to really figure it all out.
I truly didn't know that like the gifts kind of came and went just depending on, your life or, your practice channeling things. So that's super interesting to hear. Jen, you had a question?
Yeah, so you mentioned when you were describing the house how there was negative energy below and then spirit above. Can you just like tell me a little bit more about that and what, like how you distinguish that and how you pick up on that? That just sounded really interesting to me.
Definitely. So the house had a basement, and I think, people kind of always have a creepy connotation of basements to begin with. This was definitely like that, but the basement had three areas in particular, like three rooms, and one was a living area, one was a storage room, and then there was a back room that was sort of storage, laundry. And the back room that was the storage, that was where the bad energy was. Like you could walk into that area and all the hair on your body would stand up. It was freezing in there all the time and very dark. Like I'm talking about it now and the hair is all standing up again.
Oh.
I just always felt just such an awful vibration down there. Like something bad is in here. I'm being watched. It felt like something was like looming over me all the time. I only went down there if I absolutely had to. I think it was probably really frustrating for my parents, but it was a really eerie place to be. And then upstairs, where spirit was, it wasn't that same type of frequency at all. It was much more calm and peaceful. I could feel the difference when spirit would walk in and out of the room, but wasn't that icky vibration, that cold, intense energy. So there was a definite difference. And you can pick up on that where bad things are. And I've often wondered if whatever was in the basement was a part of perhaps why the young man who had committed suicide did what he did, if that had an influence on his life, because those darker entities and energies can do that to people.
Wow, that's so scary. It can be scary, it sounds like.
Mhm.
And I think we can all like on some level attest to just like, maybe not to that extreme, but like walking somewhere and just like, oh, I feel good. Or like, oh, I feel different than I did, 10 minutes ago. Something is here.
Mhm.
What is something people often get wrong about you or wrong about what you do?
I think when people hear psychic, especially because psychic seems to have more of a connotation to it than the mediumship side. So usually when I introduce myself for the first time, I will introduce myself as a medium. I feel people out usually first to see whether or not they can even handle it. And especially now in North Carolina, it's a little bit more Bible Belt-ish over here. And so I'm always a little bit more conscious of that. But when people hear psychic, a lot of times they think that you just automatically are supposed to know everything. Like if something's about to go wrong with your finances or a pipe's about to burst in the wall, like they think like, well, you're psychic. Why didn't you know that?
You don't have a crystal ball, right? Yeah.
And so like that can be a little bit frustrating because like I'm not on all the time, and I think that that's another thing too. That tends to happen more with like the mediumship, is that people feel that because you can pick up on spirit and that you can communicate with the other side, that you're always able to do it or that you are always on. But that's a part of learning about your gifts, is how to turn things off and have your own space, because this work, it is fatiguing. And a lot of times you'll find, especially with like mediums who are internationally known and acclaimed, who maybe have been doing this a lot longer, they might only see like 1 to 3 clients a day and only work maybe so many days a week because you need more rest and it's a lot. And so you have to really be thorough at clearing your energy, maintaining your space, especially if your office is in your home. Just making sure that you do a lot of extra self-care because it's draining work, but you can't always be on. That's for sure.
That was a perfect segue to my next question, which was like, what are some of the challenges and rewards that come along with this work. And that was the first thing I was thinking. I was like, I wonder how long it takes to sort of regroup or recenter after a particularly like tough session or reading.
There's no specific amount of time, and every single session is going to be different. And so there have been times where maybe I've had some back-to-back clients who are going through some really traumatic circumstances, and that can be including a loss, or someone themselves is ill, or they're just going through a really difficult time for whatever may be the reasons. And those sessions like definitely take a toll on me, but I think that it's probably a little bit more challenging for me because I'm highly clairsentient. So that's the gift of feeling. And maybe someone who's way more clairvoyant or clairaudient and not as clairsentient, maybe it's not as fatiguing for them, is all I mean by that. But I do have to take more time off. So I usually work 2 days, take a day off, 2 days, take the weekend off, and give myself the space to clear. I do a lot of self-care in between on the days of and the days off, just to help sort of reboot and re-energize. I've learned my balance at this point. And I know at some point, probably in the next year or two, I'll have to adjust my schedule again accordingly, but it takes a toll on you. And I do try to not only energetically clear after every session, but like mentally, emotionally as well. I don't want to hold on to the traumas that people are going through on any level. And so sometimes people will sit down and they'll say, I know we just spoke a month ago, but I don't remember at that point. And I can usually link back into energy from a session to help me reconnect, in the present. But I try to let go of as much as possible, because I do hear from spirit and from clients some pretty traumatic things, and it's a lot to carry. And this is a pretty heavy world that we're living in on top of that. And so even just balance and what I expose myself to, anybody who's empathic, you two are both empathic as well, and you need to balance it out too. As well as other things, I want to say that, but there's a lot of weight that comes with this work. But again, there are the blessings and the gifts too. Like, I have had so many people over the years just say the sweetest things, and I don't like it so much when they call me an angel because I'm definitely not an angel. I can be an angel in that moment for you and deliver the message, but I am definitely not an angel. But it's so rewarding to like bring people this connection that they can understand and validate and bring some peace into their life, as well as some understanding. And that in itself is the greatest reward. I feel like every time I end the day, I just give so much gratitude for the beautiful people that you brought into it. Even when they're suffering and at their worst, it is still just a gift to be in this position. And so the blessings are endless when it comes to this.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing to hear. Is there a particular way that you find yourself recharging? Is it just like being with your family? Is there something like a routine that you actually have to go through, or how do you sort of recharge?
Couple different ways. I definitely get in a good workout most mornings, and I try to make it more like grounding workouts, so not listening to like crazy music or anything like that. Long walks in nature are awesome. Gardening is so helpful. And like, I literally go out in my yard and talk to the plants and the trees and all that stuff and touch them and tell them how pretty they are. Like, it's kind of silly, but I that helps me feel grounded. But yoga and bar, Pilates, things like that are really body, mind, spirit oriented. Journal writing as needed. I stretch every night before bed, just quietly, and then I try to also have time away from phone and computer, especially when my son is home, and really just sit with him. Like in the mornings, I'm rarely ever on a device. And I just try to really have that time with him. Like our walk to school is quiet and it's just the two of us talking, and all of those little things help just keep me balanced and help me refill. But I also know I need like massage and Reiki when I can get it. And so having other healers' hands touch is helpful too.
Is there ever a time, and I don't know if this is something that happens if you're not really like in that mindset, but are you ever just like walking past somebody and feel like compelled to, I just need to let you know X, Y, and Z, or is that something that is more like kind of dramatized in movies and things?
I think we tend to see it more on like television and the movies, because if you think about it, like I love Teresa Caputo, and she's the Long Island medium, and you'll see that she walks into the grocery store. But did you ever notice like all these people are standing at the ends of the aisles and everybody's kind of waiting to watch? I mean, she's on camera at that time. She's being paid at that time. Like this is a part of the series. And so mad props for being able to do it on the fly too. It happens less now, in part because I don't want to cross those boundaries. I don't want my friendships to turn into a situation of, ooh, do you have anything to tell me? Or is there anyone that's come with me today? I appreciate a difference between my work environment and my social environment. But with that being said, there have definitely been plenty of times where, especially if I've had a couple glasses of wine and I'm like sitting there and I was like, that guy, he's got a soldier next to him. And then I'll go over and tell him everything they have to say. And then I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm done. No more. But I try to keep it completely separate. And it really is just because it is fun when that happens, on the fly. But then it's like you're in this other space and that wasn't the intent. And I'm okay with it on occasion, but rarely. And they know that.
I mean, it's fascinating work, but it is still work. So you
Yeah.
still have to like have, yeah, that balance. Oh, that's so interesting. Um, so you still have, and you have had a lot of clients here in Austin. Is there like was there a general vibe that you picked up on while you were working here? Is that even a thing? Like, are there any stories you want to share about being in Austin?
Austin's an interesting place. There's just so much energy. And I think it is fair to say, like, a lot of the energy is kind of clashing, right? Like, not just because you get all these people moving from different places, and I was one of them, so it's not dogging that, but you get a lot of difference coming in. And then you get all the highways, and they're running different ways, and there's traffic and congestion and the constant building. And so the energy in Austin in a lot of ways can be sort of conflicting and chaotic, especially, and I would find that just even working in different parts of the city. So I still did physical therapy work when I started going into the psychic mediumship. And there would be on occasion times where I would be working on somebody for a while and spirit would come in and I would give them a message. But I would find like when I was sort of in between, like very central Austin, like south of 183, north of 290/71, that's where the area was the weirdest and like the most conflicting. If especially around the 183 area, I would work for different groups at conventions and whatnot. And I would always find working in that area, it always was the most conflicting energy. Like things just weren't settled. I think that's the best way to say it. And so there's a lot of weirdness. I think we can all agree. The Austin and the energy there. But at the same time, it was a super like spiritually oriented place. And so it was a great environment to practice psychic mediumship and be in alternative healing arts. There's a lot to be grateful for from there. But I have so many stories from everywhere. But we lived for a while, a couple years, in a house off of Convict Hill, which is in South Austin, if you're familiar with that.
We
And
live like take Convict Hill to get to my aunt's house in Dripping Spring regularly. We're South Austin girls, so yes.
okay. So well, our backyard backed up to Convict Hill, and there's a lot of rumors, and I don't feel like that gives it the justice that I mean, because there's truth to the fact that literally convicts were taken out there to, take the granite out of the land, and there were enslaved people back there, and there's a lot of tragedy associated with that stretch of land, and they're still trying to find unmarked graves all around there. I know right before I left Austin, which was in 2021, we saw an article about like a particular area where they were positive they were going to find like unmarked graves, and they didn't come up with anything. But
Wow.
this house that we had there put myself in it, as attracting spirit, and my son is very gifted too. There was a lot of activity in that house. And it was the kind of place where, we're laying down and 3 o'clock in the morning, the fire alarms are going off and they're shouting, fire in the house, and there's nothing happening. Things would get knocked over, doors would be closing, and you'd walk. There was like one area of the house that was super active, and you'd walk over there and just start yelling at whatever to get out of the house, and all your hair would be standing up. Spirit was super active in that house too. So there was like icky stuff in there, and there was a lot of spirit, unsettled spirit, and spirit just coming to visit. And so I would do meditation broadcasts from that house a lot, because we were there, of course, still during COVID. And I would have people messaging me after, like, I could hear so much whispering in the background of your meditation. And I'm like, I didn't know anybody else could hear it. But that was like every night, hearing all the whispering and the chatter, and, pushing on the bed. And it was super active. And I remember one time I stopped in at Nature's Treasures, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And one of the ladies who was working for the day, she's psychic, and she came up and just held my arm and said, do you know that there's a river of blood in your backyard? And I said, I know exactly what you're talking about. And she said, I keep seeing shackles and chains and a river of blood. And as I'm saying it again, all my hair is standing up. And
Mine are too. I wasn't even there.
Yeah. And I said, it's because we live on Convict Hill. And I would go out and do like peace offerings all the time. Like our backyard was super serene, actually, because I would plant so many things and put so many crystals out there and just try to do so many blessings. And it was very safe, but energy just, no matter what I did, I could not seem to completely clear it from the house. And so that's in part what I'm talking about with the funky energy around Austin. It's there. I don't know what else to say, and I don't think it's going anywhere.
That
Blood.
is,
Oh my gosh.
is a scary story. I feel like that was also giving me chills. I didn't know, through this podcast, Jen and I have been learning a lot about just like different stories from around town, different buildings, different histories of Austin. And it does have quite a past that we're discovering. So I can understand how you were feeling that when you were here, for sure. Is there anything else you want our listeners to know?
I think that if anyone is considering working with a psychic or medium, just to be open. Nobody should ever too pressed to go into a session. Like sometimes, a person may experience loss and someone else might think, I really need to get this person a session. And that's a beautiful gesture. But people need to come to that conclusion on their own time, because it can have a negative effect if you're going for a reading and you're really not ready for it. Grieving heavily is a terrible time to try to really connect with somebody. And that's not across the board. So if someone's feeling compelled and I really want to do this, then do, but go into it with an open heart and an open mind. Leave negative pessimism at the door. There's no place for that in a session like this. And if somebody gives you the gift of reading, whether it's psychically or on a mediumship level, just take it in and sit with it. Be grateful for whatever you got. Again, the expectations, leave them at the door. I think that that's important, because sometimes someone will go in and say, oh, but you said all this and you showed me all that, but you didn't mention that one thing. And you're going to disregard everything else based off of one thing. And that's not, I've heard that for other mediums as well as myself. And so I think it's really important for people to be open-minded. It's not a science of perfection, but it should be evidential, especially when it comes to the mediumship stuff. And so be open about the type of proof that you receive, but be accepting. And, again, don't ever force it, but enjoy the experience. Try to be present for it as much as possible. I think that that's most important.
Are you still, do you still see new clients? Is there a way that if people were interested in meeting with you or working with you that they could reach you?
Definitely. Of course, I'm online, lesliewerling.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I have a YouTube channel as well. If anybody wants to look at some of the videos, I put in a few instructional videos up there for things like smudging, energetic grounding. There's guided meditations on there, inclusive of affirmation meditations. And so I've got a lot of great free resources on there and on the website as well. But I see clients 4 days a week. I teach classes too intermittently. I'm hoping to line up some psychic development classes for late spring and into the summer. And so I also send out a newsletter that people can sign up for on the website. But I'm really engaged with Instagram and especially, and then Facebook, and the website's updated all the time too. So yes, I am always accepting of new clients.
Amazing. And we'll link all of that stuff in our show notes as well, so people can find you very easily. Jen, do you have any last questions for Leslie?
Just I just kind of wonder, it sounds like you've been doing this for a long time. Are there any commonalities with spirit? Like, what do they want? Like, does it vary widely? Is there some commonality? Like, like we always, well, I don't know, like what's the purpose of life, right? Like, what do they want? I know that's such a big question and it might not be the same, but I was just wondering, after, all the work that you've done and all the experiences you've had, is there a commonality there, or is it very individualistic,
It's actually a little bit of both. And so that's a really great question, because on one hand, the commonality is always that spirit wants to be recognized and understood that they're still here. It's just different. They're not here in this physical form, but they always show me this idea of, here's our little physical parallel. It's only so wide and we can't stretch beyond it outside of our own energetic reachings, which we do through meditation and mediumship and the psychic work. But spirit's all around that. It's a part of it. It is everywhere. And so there's no boundaries that they have that we can understand. And so the common thread always is that they want us to know that they're still here. but most certainly they do come through at very specific times with messages. And sometimes it's because I know you're suffering and I need you to hear this from me and to know that I'm still with you. And you were asking for what kind of guidance I would give you the other day. And so here it is. But I mean, sometimes it's people that show up from decades ago who suddenly just want to take advantage of an opportunity to say like, hey, I remember you and you grieved for me when I left this planet and I appreciate that. And so I hope you think of me sometimes, or, you know, people have forgotten about me. Please don't let that happen. And so there's a different message pretty much each time, but always with the same tone of, I'm still here. I'm still a part of your life. And I really thoroughly enjoy it when you honor me and recognize me, whether it's talking, writing to me, sharing memories, looking at photographs. And so, yeah, they always have at least that common thread.
Oh,
That's
wow.
kind of like a comforting thought, you know,
I
that like
know.
when you do lose somebody and you are grieving, that they feel that too and appreciate it. That is a very comforting thought for sure.
Without a doubt. And if I may just add that, you know, if someone is listening to the podcast, or if you're talking to someone in conversation at a later date and they are heavily grieving, there are so many different tools out there that are connected to Eastern medicine and light work and Western medicine that can help people with the grieving process. And so be open to trying new experiences. You know, I've seen Reiki make a world of difference in helping people sift through layers of grief. But other people need therapy, and some people, you know, need to get their hands dirty and get artistic and start moving energy in different ways. And so I always encourage people to try different things to help move through the grief, because the grief sits on you like a heavy blanket. And when someone has transitioned, oftentimes they can't get through to us in a way that we can understand or recognize because of that grief. And so as you process through the grief and do things that make you healthier and happier, spirit will naturally be able to get through to you. And so that's always something to keep in mind.
I love that. I love that so much. That's so helpful to hear.
Interesting. Especially
Very,
about the grief, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's something we all experience. So that's
Yeah.
yeah, like Nina said, was really like comforting and not scary. Like I feel like maybe
Yeah.
I would assume there might be a spirit here or something, and maybe it's just, you know, media, right? Or spooky movies and things, right? Like kind of automatically going to like the scary side, but it sounds like it's not necessarily like that. And so that's really interesting for me. So that's, you know, thanks for sharing that. Definitely kind of changed my perspective a little bit there.
Definitely. Thank you.
This was, I feel like I learned a ton. I really appreciate you being here and giving us such thorough and thoughtful answers. I hope our listeners, the ghosties out there listening, learned a ton too, and hopefully they'll be reaching out to you and you'll be hearing from them.
Thank you both so much, Nina and Jen. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to be here and connect with you and your listeners, of course. And so if there's anything I can, you know, do or be a part of in the future, you know.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Much.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep your spirits high.
Perfect. Amazing.